Hi and welcome. Today is a PETITPOD, and as you've already seen, there's an Icelandic name in the title. I apologize in advance if I mangle it. I will do my best. Not all topics here are Canadian, but I am. I'm Rosie. I'm a francophone from Canada, and this is my podcast. I guess we can just jump into this history, hey? Even though some of you might not be from Iceland, you might have actually heard about this tradition through social media. There's been some memes going around with this Christmas book flood tradition. I'm going to give you an overview of the history of how this started and why it started. And as you all know, I really love books, so this seems like the perfect Christmas tradition. This Christmas book flood, or Yule book flood, which would be closer to the Jólabókaflóð, which is the Icelandic word that I'm trying not to mangle. This festivity, and it's really distinctive because it celebrates literacy and the love of books. If we go back to some of my favorite times in history, which is medieval history, we actually know that Iceland has quite the literary tradition. I mean, they had the saga of the Icelanders, the poetic Edda, and skaldic poetry. So if any of that really interests you also, you can find some of that stuff online, or you can go to the library and find some books on that. So two of the most famous Eddas, which are the two medieval Icelandic literature works, they include mythologies and legends. Something you might be familiar with if you watch any Marvel Universe movies would be the Norse gods like Odin, Thor, Loki, or even the concept of Valhalla or Ragnarok. So that all comes from the Norse mythologies that we find in these Eddas. And Icelandic medieval literature is actually why we know a lot about these Eddas. It's also quite interesting that the Icelandic language has some really cool proverbs when it comes to their love of books. So for example, they have one, "It is better to be without shoes than without a book." And this one is similar to the one in North America, but it's got a little twist. So they have a proverb saying, "A man's best friend is a book." And there's also another one that relates to something we'll chat about later, which is to walk around with a book in your stomach, which basically means to have an idea for a book. So if we look at some statistics, it's actually really interesting because Finland and Norway are the first when it comes for literacy, and Iceland is the third most literate country in the world, followed by Denmark and Sweden. So the top 5 countries with a real knack for literacy are all Nordic. And this might actually surprise quite a few of you. 93% of Icelanders read 1 book a year. And another study has estimated that about half of the country's population reads a minimum of 8 books a year. Iceland reads and even publishes more books per capita than any other place in the world. And about 1 in 10 Icelanders will actually publish a book in their lifetime. I know we seem to be getting far from the holiday, but I promise we'll get back to it. In 2011, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or as you might know them, UNESCO, they designated Reykjavik as the city of literature. So let's jump back a little bit into the Yule book flood. Apparently the holiday season starts around November, and Icelanders receive what's called a book bulletin. This is given by the Iceland Publishers Association, and it's a catalog of all the books that are going to be published that year. And it gives Icelanders the opportunity to pick a book for their friends and their family for the Yule book flood. This book catalog goes to every Icelandic home for free. The bookstores almost look like concert venues where authors are presenting and promoting their work, and it's kind of like a literary festival. It sounds fantastic. So when we talk about the Yule book flood, it's more the flood of the books coming into the bookstores than it is the flood of books coming into homes, which would also be really fantastic. So you might be wondering how this actually started. Well, this goes back to the World Wars. During the Great Depression, the country created a very intricate system of restrictions on imported goods, and it continued after the war. Therefore, the high inflation rates and the strict rules on imported goods made it really, really hard for Icelanders to get their hands on a variety of products, which affected their Christmas. But One of the things that wasn't rationed during the war was actually paper. So Icelanders were able to share their love of books given as a gift. This tradition is said to have started during World War II in 1944 when Iceland gained its independence from Denmark. Because of this tradition, Iceland is known for its book clubs, literary circles, hundreds of bookstores, and it has become a book publishing country. So you might be thinking, well, I buy books for my family all the time for Christmas. I've also purchased many books for the kids during the holidays, so I understand why you might think, how's this different? Well, the Icelanders will exchange the books on Christmas Eve and then spend the whole evening reading together. And this has become a tradition in most households, although some households might have a tradition that varies from this, but it seems to be common to unwrap your gift on the 24th and then read your gift all night. Some say that they might cozy up to the fire with some holiday drinks, or they might go to bed and just read in bed all night. But essentially, everybody gets a book at Christmas. I did read that instead of buying a new book every year, some people will trade books. And of course, if you're reading a book during the holidays, when you go to your Christmas parties, you'll probably start chatting about some of the books you've read. So book discussions are quite common at Christmas parties. And of course, this will trickle into media. And newspapers will be rating the books. They'll cover the best and the worst. They'll summarize plot lines, or they're just going to mention titles and covers and author stories. In 2008, there was a blog post by Alda Sigmundsdóttir who explained that most Icelanders will actually describe the reading of the book, eating of a chocolate, and the Christmas drink will probably be their favorite part of Christmas. So interestingly enough, in the Old Nordic calendar, the first day of winter is considered International Book Giving Day. Some of you might consider that this tradition is worth repeating. So in your own country, perhaps you should try your own take on this. I know that in Canada, I definitely would not mind starting this tradition. Wouldn't that be a perfect Christmas Eve? Sitting around reading with your family, eating some chocolate, and drinking some holiday drink. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, @HistoryA. I can't forget to thank my husband Jamie, our brood of kids, our family, our friends. Without them, I definitely wouldn't be adventuring through history. Un grand merci.